When most people think of tornadoes, they picture the Great Plains, Oklahoma, Kansas, and the infamous Tornado Alley. But what many don't realize is that one of the most devastating, most deadly tornadoes in American history tore through the northeastern United States, striking at the heart of Massachusetts. Today, we are going to examine the strongest and deadliest tornadoes to ever strike New England and the greater Northeast. First, we'll cover a massive F-4 that struck Massachusetts on June 9, 1953. It stands alone as the single deadliest F-4 tornado in recorded history. And we'll finish with the Wheatland, Pennsylvania F-5 tornado, the easternmost F-5 tornado ever to hit the United States. Let's begin our journey through the most terrifying weather events the Northeast has ever witnessed. Hello, and welcome to Deadliest Disasters. Massachusetts. It is the most populous state in New England and the 16th most populous state in the country, and they hold the record for the deadliest single tornado in all of the northeastern United States. On June 7, 1953, a strong shortwave trough moved eastward over the Rocky Mountains. This brought strong upward motion that included Lee cyclogenesis, the development of cyclones on the downwind side of mountains caused by the airflow being disturbed by the terrain. This is especially common in eastern Colorado. Combined with warm, unstable air over the Great Plains and an elevated mixed layer from the desert southwest, conditions became favorable for severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. More than 30 tornadoes occurred that day across Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa, including a violent tornado that killed 11 people near Arcadia, Nebraska. On June 8th, the storm system moved northeast, producing several tornadoes in Michigan, Ohio, and Nebraska. Most notably, the Flint Beecher tornado struck the northern Flint suburb of Beecher, Michigan. This tornado, later rated F5, killed 116 people and injured 844. The same violent storm system continued moving east, bringing warm, moist, unstable air into the New England area. By afternoon, temperatures in Worcester, Massachusetts had reached 80 degrees Fahrenheit, with a dew point of 66 degrees. In combination with cold air aloft, atmospheric conditions were very unstable and conducive to severe weather. Amplified wind shear was present in the afternoon of June 9th, making conditions supportive of supercell development and the formation of tornadoes. Forecasters at the National Weather Service office in Boston believed there was a possibility for tornado activity in the area. However, they did not include such an advisory in their forecast, fearing that people might panic unnecessarily. 1953 was the first year that tornado and severe thunderstorm warnings were used, and officials did not yet know how the public would react to such warnings. The forecasters compromised and issued the first severe thunderstorm watch in the history of Massachusetts. Most news reports only mentioned possible thunderstorms, not a tornado. As early as 10 a.m. Eastern Time, the Weather Bureau in Boston anticipated the likelihood of tornadic conditions that afternoon, but they refrained from using the word tornado, fearing it would strike panic in the public. This caused the tornado to strike with very little warning to the residents. The tornado that formed that afternoon was rated F4 on the Fujita scale. F4 tornadoes produce devastating damage with winds between 207 and 260 miles per hour. They can demolish well-constructed houses, throw cars and large objects considerable distances, and level even substantial structures. But it wasn't the intensity alone that made the Worcester tornado so deadly. It was the combination of factors: the tornado's size, its path through a populated area, the nearly complete lack of warning, and the fact that 1953 was an era before modern meteorology, before Doppler radar, before the technology that helps protect us today. When the tornado finally dissipated and rescue workers could assess the damage, the numbers were staggering. The final death toll from the Worcester F4 tornado was 94 people killed and 1,288 others injured. This tornado produced the highest number of deaths ever resulting from an F4 or EF4 tornado in recorded history. No F-4 tornado, before or since, has killed more people. The tornado was part of the greater Flint-Worcester tornado outbreak sequence, the same massive storm system that had produced the F5 in Flint the day before. Together, these two tornadoes, Flint and Worcester, killed 210 people in just 2 days. These tornadoes changed how we think about tornado forecasting in the United States. The tragedy demonstrated that warning people, even if some might panic, is far better than staying silent and allowing a tornado to strike with no warning at all. New Hampshire's tornado history stretches back over 2 centuries, and it is a history marked by tragedy across multiple generations. The deadliest tornado on record in New Hampshire struck the Warner-Salisbury area in September 1821. Based on historical accounts from over 200 years ago, this tornado was estimated to be an EF4, capable of producing winds up to 200 miles per hour and destroying even well-constructed houses. The tornado cut a path of damage a half-mile wide through the rural communities. 6 people were killed in the 1821 tornado. One account from the time described a family's house being torn completely apart during the storm. In a twist of fate that seems impossible, a boy was saved when the tornado threw him into the family's fireplace where he survived. Others weren't so fortunate. But perhaps the most heartbreaking tornado in New Hampshire's history occurred much more recently. On July 24, 2008, the Deerfield Epsom tornado touched down around 11:30 in the morning. This was a powerful EF2 tornado that would tear a remarkable 50-mile path through southeastern New Hampshire, unusually long for the region. The tornado traveled through 11 communities, remaining on the ground for approximately 80 minutes. Its length and duration were extraordinary for a northeast tornado. As it carved its path of destruction, the tornado destroyed or damaged hundreds of homes and flattened large wooded areas. And in Deerfield, it would claim 1 life. Brenda Stevens was a wife, mother, and grandmother. When the tornado struck her home on July 24, 2008, she was holding her 2-month-old grandson. As the house began to disintegrate around them, Brenda clung to the baby as long as she could, trying to protect him with her own body. But the force of the tornado was too powerful. The baby was ripped from her arms, and Brenda Stevens was killed when her home collapsed on her. Miraculously, the 2-month-old boy was found alive in the rubble with no major injuries. While not as powerful or as deadly as the Warner-Salisbury tornado of 1821, the Deerfield Epsom tornado was a record-breaking event in terms of its path length and duration. But it's Brenda Stevens' sacrifice and the miracle of her grandson's survival that makes this tornado unforgettable. Moving northeast to Maine, a state with relatively low tornado activity, but that doesn't mean they can't be deadly. On August 11, 1954, an F2 tornado struck north of Caribou in far northern Maine. The tornado's path was approximately 5 miles long, and as it tore through the rural landscape, it destroyed barns and in one horrifying moment, picked up an entire house and tossed it into another structure. This violent collision resulted in 1 death and 1 injury, the only recorded tornado fatality in Maine's history. While a single death might seem minor compared to other northeastern states, it represents 100% of Maine's tornado fatalities, making it one of the state's most impactful weather disasters. Maine has certainly seen tornadoes since 1954. The last confirmed tornado in the state was in 2023, but one of the most notable events occurred on July 1, 2017. 5 tornadoes touched down in a single day, a record-setting mini outbreak for the state. That day also saw more tornado warnings issued than any other day in Maine's history, including a dramatic tornado over Sebago Lake. However, none of these more recent events resulted in any fatalities. Maine's single tornado death stands as a somber reminder that even in states where tornadoes are rare, these storms can still be deadly. Vermont, a state that statistically speaking has been the most fortunate when it comes to tornadoes. Vermont has recorded the weakest maximum tornado intensity of any state we'll discuss today. Since 1950, only about 50 tornadoes have been documented in Vermont, making them exceptionally rare occurrences. The strongest tornadoes ever recorded in Vermont topped out at F2 intensity on the Fujita scale. While F2 tornadoes can certainly cause significant damage with winds between 113 and 157 miles per hour, they're considered a significant risk factor rather than severe or violent. One notable F2 struck Bennington County on May 31, 1998, causing extensive damage to homes and trees on the Bennington College campus and knocking out power for thousands. More recently, on March 26, 2021, an EF1 tornado struck the northeast side of Middlebury, Vermont. This tornado was on the ground for approximately 1 minute, covering a path of about 0.6 miles with a maximum width of 75 yards. In this short duration, 2 people were injured and 4 homes suffered damage. This Middlebury tornado holds a unique distinction. It's the earliest occurrence of a tornado in Vermont in a given calendar year, dating back through at least 1950. New York presents a fascinating and tragic case study in tornado behavior. They've experienced rare, fatal F1 tornadoes and massive, deadly F4 tornadoes, showing that no matter the size or the rating, any tornado can be deadly. On August 28, 1973, at approximately 1 p.m., an F4 tornado touched down in Canaan, New York. An F4 tornado is violent, with winds between 207 and 260 miles per hour. These storms can demolish well-constructed houses and throw massive objects considerable distances. This F4 moved in a south-southeast direction across the Massachusetts state line into the town of West Stockbridge, Massachusetts. The tornado's path of destruction bore a scar for miles. It caused significant damage to the Berkshire Farm for Boys in Canaan, then, in the words of contemporary reports, obliterated nearly every house in its path in West Stockbridge. Before dissipating, it leveled the Berkshire truck stop on Massachusetts Route 102 near the Massachusetts Turnpike. At the truck stop, the scene was apocalyptic. The tornado overturned and threw trucks and cars like toys and ripped gas pumps out of their stands, roots, and all. When the tornado finally dissipated, the toll was grim. 4 people had been killed, including 3 at the truck stop. 36 others were injured, and approximately $25 million in damage had been done. That's $150 million in today's dollars. More recently, on June 22, 2025, just a few months ago, an EF1 tornado touched down in Clark Mills in Oneida County at 3:58 in the morning. This storm remained on the ground for only 5 minutes, traveling a path of just 2.43 miles while uprooting and snapping trees that damaged many structures. Many think an EF1 tornado, the weakest category that causes any sort of notable damage, wouldn't be particularly deadly, but this tornado proves otherwise. 3 people died as a result of this EF1 tornado. They were killed when trees fell on 2 separate homes. These 3 fatalities serve as a stark reminder that even the smallest tornadoes can be killers, especially when they strike in the dark of night with little warning. This tornado resulted from the tail end of the same storm system that spawned the EF5 in Enderlin, North Dakota, a massive weather system that stretched across the continent. New York's tornado history shows us that these storms respect no boundaries and spare no one, whether you're sleeping in your home at 4 a.m. or working at a truck stop on a summer afternoon. New Jersey has a recorded tornado history spanning hundreds of years. The deadliest happened on June 19, 1835 in Middlesex County. The tornado destroyed all but 2 of 12 houses in Piscataway before proceeding toward New Brunswick, where it struck what is now part of downtown along a path through or near what is now Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital property, Monument Square, and George Street. In New Brunswick, the scene was described in a newspaper account from the New York Evening Star on June 20, 1835, saying, quote, About 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon, a tornado passed over the town of Piscataway, about 2 miles from New Brunswick, which destroyed every house but 2. The current proceeded towards the city of New Brunswick and made a dreadful havoc in that place, destroying and damaging nearly 150 houses in Liberty, Richmond, and Sherman streets." End quote. 5 people were killed in this tornado, including a widow named Van Arsdale, a former Navy midshipman named Henry Borsman, who was killed in the street, and a boy named Bayard. Since then, New Jersey has continued to see smaller, less deadly tornadoes. On September 1st, 2021, a violent EF3 tornado would strike the state, one of only 4 EF3s ever confirmed in New Jersey history. This intense wedge tornado first touched down at 6:10 p.m., east-southeast of Harrisonville, initially causing minor tree damage. But as it paralleled Route 45 to its west through Gloucester County, the tornado rapidly intensified. Tree damage became more significant as it moved northeast into Cedar Grove, where dozens of trees were downed at EF1 intensity. Then the tornado became strong and destructive as it struck the Willow Oaks subdivision at the northeast edge of Cedar Grove. Multiple homes sustained significant structural damage on Marvin Lane. Roofs were ripped off, exterior walls collapsed, vehicles were moved and damaged, and one home was left with only a few walls standing. The damage in this area was rated EF3. After weakening momentarily, the tornado reached its peak intensity of mid-range EF3 as it moved over Salvatore Lane and Clem's Run in Mullica Hill. Several 2-story homes sustained total roof and exterior wall loss, and cars were tossed around. One house was completely leveled, though investigators noted it was not well anchored. The tornado continued into Mantua Township, passed west of Barnesboro, and impacted Winona before it finally narrowed and weakened. By the time it finally dissipated at 6:30 p.m., after 20 minutes of terror, it had traveled 12.37 miles and reached a maximum path width of 400 yards. Only 2 people were injured, and damages exceeded $64 million. Luckily, no fatalities occurred. This tornado demonstrated that New Jersey, despite its location, remains vulnerable to violent tornadoes. Connecticut, a state that has experienced devastating tornadoes across 2 different centuries, and the contrast between them tells us much about how tornado preparedness and documentation have evolved. On Friday, August 9, 1878, a large tornado struck the town of Wallingford. This was a violent tornado, unofficially rated F-4 by tornado expert Thomas P. Grazulis. The tornado destroyed most of the town, and when the winds finally stopped, the death toll was staggering. About 34 people killed, estimated totals varied in the chaos of the disaster, and at least 70 injured, many severely, with life-changing injuries they would never fully recover from. This was the deadliest tornado ever to strike the state of Connecticut. It remains the second deadliest tornado ever in New England, second only to the Worcester, Massachusetts F-4 tornado. More than a century passed. Then, on Monday, July 10, 1989, a destructive series of tornadoes struck the northeastern United States. The storm system affected 5 states with severe weather, including hail up to 2.5 inches across, thunderstorm winds up to 90 miles per hour, and 17 total confirmed tornadoes. Several towns in New York and Connecticut were particularly hard hit. While tornado outbreaks in this area are unusual, this storm was especially rare in that it produced 6 significant tornadoes, including 2 violent F-4 tornadoes and several long-tracked tornadoes. An hour after tornadoes devastated parts of upstate New York, a new tornado family began producing significant damage in Connecticut. The first tornado, which may have actually been 3 separate tornadoes, started its path of destruction in Cornwall, leveling an old-growth forest known as Cathedral Pines. At the nearby Mohawk Mountain ski area, every single ski lift was destroyed, with some lift chairs found miles away, evidence of the incredible violence of the winds. The tornado continued south-southeast through Milton, leveling hundreds more trees, and destroyed the village of Bantam before dissipating. Strong downburst winds continued to cause damage and level trees after this tornado lifted, and it was during this period between tornadoes that tragedy struck. A 12-year-old girl was killed by falling trees in Black Rock State Park, the only fatality of the entire outbreak. Soon afterwards, another tornado touched down in Watertown, passing through Oakville and northern Waterbury, damaging or destroying 150 homes. But the Hamden tornado was by far the most destructive tornado of this family, and possibly the most damaging of the entire outbreak. It touched down at 5:38 p.m. near the Wilbur Cross Parkway. Industrial cranes and cars were tossed through the air. Rows of houses and an entire industrial park were flattened to the ground. The tornado was on the ground for just 7 minutes, from 5:38 to 5:45 p.m., but in those 7 minutes, it carved a damage path 5 miles long, stopping just short of the city of New Haven. Nearly 400 structures were damaged or destroyed. The storm system was so intense that an 80-mile-per-hour wind gust was measured in downtown New Haven after the tornado had already dissipated, strong enough to be considered a weak tornado itself. While this tornado was not as deadly as the Wallingford tornado of 1878, the fact that it got an official F-4 rating makes it the strongest to have officially hit the state of Connecticut. The tornado outbreak injured more than 150 people. The death of that 12-year-old girl serves as a tragic reminder that even with modern warning systems, tornadoes and their associated storms can be very deadly. Rhode Island, the smallest state in the Union, has an equally small tornado history. August 7, 1986, marked the first multiple tornado day recorded in Rhode Island history. A weak F1 tornado briefly touched down near Lincoln around 3:30 p.m., but it was the second tornado of the day that would prove far more destructive. At approximately 4:30 p.m., an F2 tornado touched down and immediately destroyed a home at 43 Hillwood Street in Providence, owned by Lynn Pancheck Price. This tornado stayed on the ground for 4 minutes, carving a path of destruction through the capital city and the adjacent town of Cranston. By the time it dissipated, 20 people had been injured and approximately $2.5 million in damage had been done. Rhode Island remained relatively quiet on the tornado front for decades after 1986, up until August 18, 2023. On that day, an EF2 tornado touched down in Scituate, uprooting and snapping trees, tearing apart power lines, and ripping apart a roof of a house. The tornado was unusual in its behavior. It moved along a discontinuous path, lifting off the ground and touching back down several times during its lifespan. As it moved into Johnston, it weakened to EF1 strength, but still managed to cross Interstate 295, where in one terrifying moment, it briefly lifted a car into the air, injuring the driver. The tornado also impacted parts of North Providence at EF1 strength before finally dissipating. This 2023 tornado was the strongest reported tornado in Rhode Island since that Cranston tornado of August 7, 1986, a fortunate span of 37 years. Fortunately, like Vermont, Rhode Island has recorded no tornado fatalities in its documented history. Pennsylvania's most significant tornado wasn't just the strongest in state history, it holds a unique and ominous distinction in the entire United States. On May 31, 1985, a violent tornado began in eastern Ohio and tore directly through the towns of Niles, Ohio and Wheatland, Pennsylvania, producing F5 damage at both locations. An F5 tornado represents the absolute pinnacle of tornado violence, the most extreme classification on the Fujita scale, with winds estimated at 261 to 318 miles per hour. These are storms that could sweep well-constructed homes completely off their foundations and throw massive objects for incredible distances. This massive F5 tornado killed 18 people and injured 310 others. It was the most violent and deadly of the 44 tornadoes recorded that day across the United States. But here's what makes this tornado historically significant. Registering F5 on the Fujita scale, it remains the easternmost recorded F5 or EF5 tornado in the United States as of 2025. It is also the only F5 in Pennsylvania history, the last F5 in Ohio to date, and was the most violent tornado reported in the United States in 1985. The tornado first touched down in Ohio near the Ravenna Arsenal in Portage County around 6:30 p.m. Gathering strength rapidly, it moved into Newton Falls in Trumbull County, causing F3 to F4 damage through much of the town. Remarkably, while nearly 400 homes were heavily damaged or destroyed in Newton Falls, no fatalities were recorded there, thanks to the storm readiness of local authorities and the town's tornado siren system. A testament to the life-saving value of preparation and warning systems. Additional homes were completely destroyed as the tornado struck the north side of Lordstown. Then, continuing east, the tornado reached F5 intensity as it tore through the north side of Niles. The devastation in Niles was absolute. Hundreds of homes were destroyed, including several homes with anchor bolts that were swept completely away, with the debris scattered downwind. The Niles Park Plaza Shopping Center was completely leveled and partially swept away at F5 intensity. Steel girders were buckled at the shopping center like they were made of aluminum foil. A nearby retirement home and a skating rink were leveled as well. But it's what happened at an industrial area in Niles that truly demonstrates the incomprehensible power of an F5 tornado. Large metal petroleum storage tanks, each standing 30 feet tall and weighing 75,000 pounds, were torn from where they were anchored and thrown through the air. Some of these massive tanks were tossed or bounced considerable distances. One tank was found in the middle of the road, 60 yards from where it originated. A 75,000-pound steel tank thrown like a toy. The tornado weakened slightly as it moved through the north side of Hubbard and through the center of Coleburg, though many homes were still leveled in those areas. Then, it crossed the state line into Pennsylvania. As the tornado reached Wheatland, Pennsylvania, it was half a mile wide and had regained F5 strength. A steel-frame trucking plant in Wheatland was obliterated and partially swept away at F5 intensity. The building's steel girder frame was mangled into a twisted pile and pushed completely off of its foundation. At nearby Wheatland Sheet and Tube, the tornado was so violent that sections of pavement were scoured from the parking lot. Shards of sheet metal and routing slips were found wedged beneath the remaining asphalt, driven into the ground by winds exceeding 250 miles per hour. 95% of Wheatland's business and residential area were destroyed. According to the storm data from the National Weather Service, the destruction of the town resembled that of a bombed-out battlefield. Continuing east, the tornado weakened slightly but remained violent as it struck Hermitage, damaging or destroying 71 homes along with the town's airport, destroying several hangars and planes. A wing from one of the planes was found 10 miles away in Mercer. The tornado destroyed 15 homes and damaged 30 others in the Greenfield area before finally dissipating. In Ohio, it was the deadliest tornado since the infamous Xenia F5 tornado, which occurred during the super outbreak of April 3, 1974. The tornado was captured on camera by several residents, providing haunting documentation of one of the most powerful tornadoes ever to strike the eastern United States. The Niles Wheatland F5 stands as a reminder that F5 tornadoes, while rare anywhere, can and do occur in the Northeast. That reaches the end of our list. We've now journeyed through 9 states and examined some of the most powerful and deadly tornadoes in northeastern and New England history. We've seen F5 violence in Pennsylvania, historic devastation in Connecticut, and tragedy across generations in New Hampshire. We've learned that even states like Vermont and Rhode Island, which have never recorded a tornado fatality, are not immune to powerful storms. But one tornado stands above all the others in terms of human cost: the Worcester, Massachusetts F4 tornado of June 9, 1953. With 94 deaths and 1,288 injuries, it remains the deadliest F4 or EF4 tornado in recorded history. The Worcester tornado and all other tornadoes we discussed today remind us of several crucial truths. First, tornadoes can and do occur anywhere in the United States, not just in Tornado Alley. Second, even relatively weak tornadoes like the EF1 in Clark Mills, New York, can be deadly, especially when they strike at night or with little warning. Third, preparation saves lives. Storm readiness and proper sheltering can reduce the amount of fatalities and injuries even in the strongest of tornadoes. And finally, we must never forget the victims of these storms. The 94 who died in Worcester, the 18 who died in Wheatland and Niles, Brenda Stevens holding her grandson until the very end, and the 12-year-old girl killed in Black Rock State Park. Every number represents a person, a family, and a life cut short by the awesome and terrible power of nature. Thank you all for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover. This has been Deadliest Disasters.